It's the company I'll introduce in a little more detail coming up. But basically, we're a safety and security company, and like all of you in the audience, we're starting to take products and connect them up to the Internet of Things. What I'd like to focus on today is how we balance convenience and security as we start to connect up those products. As you know, the IoT is about taking, ultimately, virtually any powered device in the future and connecting them up not only to the Internet, but to each other in this seamless mesh. And the reason we do that is not simply to connect up products, but to give our customers, the end users, new levels of productivity, efficiency, and for consumer products, convenience. So think about a scenario in the future where it's a work day, and while you're asleep, your calendar system notes that your first meeting of the day is at 8 o'clock in the morning in the office. It takes a look at the real-time traffic information and figures out your commute is going to take about 15 minutes longer than normal this morning. So it sends a message to your alarm clock to wake you up at 6 o'clock instead of 6:15. Your connected coffee maker knows that you typically like to get your first cup of coffee exactly 14 minutes after you wake up. It takes 5 minutes to brew, so at 6:09 your coffee maker turns on and starts brewing that first pot of coffee. You get ready, you have your coffee, you head to the front door, the electronic lock automatically unlocks, and in doing so sends a message to your autonomous self-driving car to start up, warm up, pull out of the garage, and as you exit the home, the lock locks behind you and you're on your way. The car, of course, figures out the best, most efficient route to work while you surf the Internet and check the news of the day. You pull up in front of the office and the car drops you off at the front door before going off and parking itself. As you walk up to the front door, cameras near the door look at your gait and your face, and with at least 2 steps of verification, figure out who you are, authorize access, and the door opens up without you having to do anything at all. As you walk into the lobby of the building, your wearable tells you your first meeting of the day is on the 31st floor in conference room A, and that you should go to elevator number 5 to go straight up to that floor. And as you approach the meeting, your wearable tells you who's already in attendance and whether the meeting's due to start on time. Now think about how more productive and efficient your day has already been 2 hours into it, because all of these products are not only connected to the cloud, but they're connected to each other and creating a seamless user experience. But all that connectivity, the 26 billion devices that we expect to be connected by 2020, all present security challenges. Those devices I talked about, the old-fashioned unconnected devices, don't have any inherent additional security vulnerabilities. You know, what's the worst thing that can happen with an unconnected coffee maker? I suppose a short circuit could cause a fire, but it's not causing a security risk in your life. And there's really 2 kinds of vulnerabilities that can get exposed by connected devices. First, they can be hijacked to do something they were never intended to do. So we've talked about botnets. Well, that coffee maker could be enlisted to participate in a DDoS attack. Or the processor on your autonomous car could be used to mine bitcoins while it's sitting in the parking lot near at work. Maybe not a huge impact to you as the consumer, but wouldn't you rather, if you're paying for that processing power, that it's mining bitcoins for you and not some bad actor? The other thing is, devices can be hijacked to do what they were intended to do, but in a bad way. So that autonomous car could be instructed to take you someplace where you don't really want to go, or maybe you could be extorted for money. Or somebody just trying to shut down a city could send a command to all the autonomous cars to stop. So there's additional levels of insecurity that are offered up by the connecting of all these devices. And we need to make sure that we have a balance between security and convenience. And what I want to emphasize is that balance is different depending on the product that we're talking about. So here's a range of consumer products that are being connected up to the IoT. On the left, believe it or not, is a connected hairbrush. This thing actually exists, a $200 hairbrush that connects up to the internet. It has accelerometers and gyrometers and sensors that tell you if you're doing a good job brushing your hair. This is actually a thing. It also looks at the weather. And apparently, you're supposed to brush your hair differently if it's going to be humid versus if it's going to be dry. So, for some people, that's some pretty good convenience. Security, probably not a huge concern for these devices. I honestly don't know what bad thing could happen if my connected hairbrush got hijacked. But on the other end of the spectrum, the kind of products my company makes, electronic locks, obviously, if these things get hacked, we have a life safety issue. We had medical device manufacturers in here yesterday. That's an even more extreme case of a life safety issue. But somebody sending remote unlock commands to your front door, as I'm going to talk about later, is a pretty big deal. Even status information, if somebody were to hack that, could tell could tell a thief when you're home and when you're not. And then, of course, this is a spectrum. There's products in between these two extremes, and the key is we have to find the right balance in each case between convenience and security. And we talked in the panel yesterday about, are there real examples of hacks that have happened in the IoT today? And these are just 6 of them that are real-world hacks that have happened, of varying degrees of severity. I think probably half a dozen times yesterday the Mirai botnet was mentioned. This happened because there were millions of connected devices out there that didn't require the user to change the default login. So there were literally millions of opportunities with admin/password to hack in there and take over these devices and do the DDoS attack, which, as you know, shut down Twitter and Netflix for a significant amount of time. Probably hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars of economic damage. In the upper middle, and I'm not mentioning manufacturer names here because I'm kind of sensitive to, I've had my own products where the black hat security researchers have told me about vulnerabilities. So I'm not naming names here, but a pacemaker. Okay, so this pacemaker would send information to the patient's physician. There was a universal code that every pacemaker had the same code, probably so that their customer service people could resolve login issues that a physician might have. But the hackers, once they broke that code, could now take over every single pacemaker from this manufacturer. We don't know of any cases where they actually did so in a patient, but think about what they could do to somebody if they started sending shocks or the wrong pattern of pulses to patients wearing this. There's a baby heart monitor. So this is a heart monitor you put in the crib, and there was a base station, and then the parents could monitor their baby's health remotely. The manufacturer did a pretty good job of encrypting the traffic from the base station to the cloud. They stored the data encrypted in the cloud, but they had an ad hoc Wi-Fi unencrypted connection between the monitor and the base station. So anybody sitting in Wi-Fi range could do a man-in-the-middle attack and take over the baby heart rate monitor and send incorrect information to the parents. Lower left, a line of webcams that for a 2-year period, basically, I've just forgotten what they did wrong in this case. But for a 2-year period, hackers could basically get login information in the clear and monitor people's webcams. And, people put these in very private places in their homes. Several times yesterday, the SUV hack was mentioned. One of the more famous ones announced at the Black Hat conference. And then I talked in the panel session about a hotel lock hack that happened. This wasn't technically an IoT device. These were unconnected hotel locks that used the MagStripe reader. But the manufacturer kept what's called a facility key, essentially the electronic version of a master key, in memory on the unsecure side of the door. So on the hallway side of the door, the hacker was able to, through a power port, get to memory, download the facility key, go out to their car and print themselves a mag card that It was the same one that the maintenance people in the hotel had, and it opened every single door in the hotel. Every customer, every hotel had this vulnerability. And there are actually cases after this got publicized where hotel patrons, their rooms were broken into because somebody had actually wrote an embedded version of this hack, put it into a pen case so they could walk down the hall with what looked like a pen, plug it into a hotel lock, download the key, and then break into every room. So real theft happened as a result of this hack. And that one hits particularly close to home for me because I work for Allegion and we are a safety and security company. So we make devices that control entry and access into commercial and residential facilities. And we're a young company, only about 4 years old, but we spun off from a much larger conglomerate, Ingersoll Rand. And as you're going to see, we're a family of brands that are in our markets all over the world. And I know there's people from countries all over the world here, and you probably notice some of the security brands that are strong brands in your local market. And security, like many other things we've been talking about yesterday, started out as a purely mechanical solution. In fact, security is always going to be, at its heart, a mechanical job. Until force fields are invented, security is about physically stopping the wrong people from getting into a facility or a home, while also allowing the right people in. Or, in the event of emergency, allowing quick, safe egress. So it's about creating a mechanical barrier that you can put into place and take out of place. And in a purely mechanical system, well, security basically has the role of establishing identity. Are you authorized or not? And then making an access decision based on that identity. In a mechanical system, that's the job of the key. Possession of a key equals identity. And if the key fits the lock, then you have authorization. It knows nothing about you as an individual. That's how it establishes identity and access rights. Well, like everything else, we started adding electronics. And now we can issue electronic keys. They do the same job as the mechanical key. They establish identity, and then within the lock, it decides if you're authorized entry or egress. And Allegion has been a leader in bringing electronics into the locking world. So one of our more famous brands, very strong in the US, and we also sell in China with that brand, is Schlage. So Schlage was founded by a German immigrant to the US named Walter Schlage, and in 1909, his very first patent was for a lock that would turn on and off the lights when you touched it. I'm happy to say it only took us 80 years to put his idea into production with our first line of residential wireless locks. And you can see, I won't go through all these products here, it's not meant to be an advertisement. The takeaway is, you can see the connectivity technologies and how they evolved. And up until the advent of Wi-Fi in the late 90s, the only connectivity we had available to us was ISM band radios, which of course are different frequencies from country to country. When Wi-Fi came out in 1997, we finally had a global connectivity solution available to us. But as you're going to see, not very suitable to battery-powered devices. And then we had kind of an arms race between lower power, lower bandwidth techniques like Zigbee, Bluetooth, and Z-Wave. And then finally the breakthrough that made electronic locking really possible was Bluetooth Low Energy in 2010. And you can see generally as technologies came out, within about 3 to 4 years, we had locks employing that new connectivity strategy. Not only us, but also our competitors around the world. So let's look at the topology of a lock connected to the Internet of Things. And it all starts down at the bottom with the lock itself. And traditionally, before we started connecting them, all you would see is the mechanical cylinder. So that was the old way of doing things. The first step was to add a keypad. So now through that user interface, you can assign PIN codes and get a level of electronic access control, unconnected. The next step was to add a peer-to-peer relationship with a mobile device over Bluetooth Low Energy. And this allowed the mobile device to now be the GUI for the lock. So now you could set up new PIN codes, you could revoke PIN codes through your mobile device, but you generally had to be within Bluetooth range for that system to work. You could get some level of what appeared to be remote access because your mobile device could connect to the cloud. But for anything to be updated in the lock, you needed to be within Bluetooth range. But then more recently, as we truly have connected into the IoT, we've developed gateways that will communicate Bluetooth to the lock and then Wi-Fi to get out to the cloud. And now we have true 24/7 access to the lock. So from here in China, I can pull out my mobile app. Maybe my wife has said the toilet's leaking and we need a plumber to go into the house, but she's not going to be home. I can issue him a credential that's valid for a 2-hour period tomorrow afternoon when he's going to be in the home to fix the toilet. And I can do that from anywhere in the world. So that's the convenience that's being brought about by connecting locks to the Internet of Things. The security challenge, as you all know, is every single one of those arrows represents a new attack surface. Okay, so previously in a mechanical system, the only way somebody could attack my lock is to physically go to it and either pick it or smash it open. Now, they have lots of opportunities to get into the system without ever even actually being at my front door. So I'm providing my customers a lot of convenience, but I've also opened up new avenues of attack. And we have to continue to find that balance. Now, in this architecture, the one bit of good news for my team and I is we control everything in this topology. We design the lock and the electronics and the firmware on board. We write the mobile app. We wrote the application in the cloud. Now, we are a bit dependent on the cloud service providers to do a good job with the infrastructure for Apple and the Android handset device manufacturers to do a good job with hardware security. But generally, we control all these connections. But to get the real power of the IoT, that scenario I talked about in the beginning, where everything in your life is communicating with each other, you know, here I've just drawn in one additional device. So this is a Nest thermostat. And think about the integrated user experience if when I open my front door electronically, if my thermostat then says, oh, you're coming home, I'm going to make the house cooler. Or you've left, I'm going to go into a more efficient mode with some direct communications. And that's just one example. With if this, then that, you add in lights, you add in power controls, video cameras, that starts to expand exponentially. Those blue arrows, I don't control. Now I'm dependent on other manufacturers, other vendors, taking security as seriously as I do. Exponentially improved convenience when we have these products connect up to each other. But the purpose of this illustration is, here's an example where we have prioritized security over convenience because right now, even though there's a lot of scenarios that are really powerful, if I allow this connection to happen, I'm not allowing it today. I don't allow anyone else to get status information or send lock and unlock commands to the lock. That always comes from me and my system. So I'm deprioritizing some of the convenience because we're still working on the security issues. I also like to brag a little bit for my team that I think, at least in terms of the consumer IoT space, the electronic lock is actually the toughest device to get right. And that's because we're both a sensor and an actuator. We have to be battery powered because nowhere in the world does a residential door have mains power to it. It would cost thousands of dollars to add mains power. So we're forced to be battery powered. But to get the full benefit of the IoT, we have to be on 24/7. For me to issue a code to the plumber from here in China so they can go and fix my house, that lock has to be awake with a persistent connection so that I can tell it there's somebody coming to open the door. And so on 4 AA batteries, I need to, for 1 to 2 years, be able to not only stay awake all the time communicating, but also have a motor to run a bolt. So pretty tough power challenge. And so then that leads us to some decisions around connectivity. The top part of the chart just shows kind of the bandwidth spectrum of IoT devices. We're considered kind of a home automation device. I don't need to move tons and tons of data, which allows me to be sort of in the sub-megabit per second regime. And then the options available to me in the consumer IoT are down in the bottom. I talked about Wi-Fi a little bit. Wi-Fi has the advantages of being the first ubiquitous connectivity solution. It's on every mobile device, every computer, virtually every home in the developed world has Wi-Fi inside it. Some of the disadvantages, it's not full stack, so there's not a defined application layer, so Wi-Fi devices need a mediating application to handle communication. And then it's really designed for these higher bandwidth applications, and there's not a low power mode that's suitable for me as a battery powered device. I'd love for Wi-Fi to figure out how to have a Wi-Fi low energy, but the duty cycle is just very power inefficient. Which leads us to Bluetooth. So Bluetooth came out, and then followed on with a low energy mode. The advantage of Bluetooth is it's full stack, so it has a defined application layer and is truly interoperable. So Bluetooth products can talk to each other without having to have an intermediary. Now, both of those operate, at least today, in a star topology, which can be a disadvantage. The effective range that I see from Bluetooth is 10 meters or less in a real application, even though they claim 100 meters range. And the lack of mesh networking capability means that my bridge needs to be fairly close to the front door. But then we have some proprietary mesh networking standards that you see around the world. The first being Z-Wave. And Z-Wave, like Bluetooth, is full stack. So out of the box, Z-Wave devices are able to communicate to each other pretty effectively. It has full interoperability. It's both a pro and a con, but Z-Wave is sub-megahertz, so it's on the ISM band. The pro, that's not as crowded a band as what everything else is playing on, so there's less interference. Generally, we get a little bit better range, but the frequency that it operates on is different from country to country, meaning I can't develop a single hardware solution to sell around the world. Zigbee uses the same frequency as Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, has mesh networking, but as you see, while it shows it as being full stack and having a defined application layer, that's kind of a misnomer. It has a variety of application layers, so there's not true interoperability between Zigbee devices. But Zigbee is pretty popular in the security space. And then finally, there's Thread. I'm not aware of any devices yet using Thread, but it was Google's kind of add-on to Zigbee, their way to improve it, so we'll continue to monitor and see how that does. Locks do get hacked. I alluded to this yesterday. A couple of years ago at DEF CON, a couple of researchers surveyed 16 BLE-connected locks. 75% of them, so 12 of them, had insufficient BLE security. Of those 12, 4 of them actually stored credentials, passwords, in clear text in onboard accessible memory. Of the 4 that had decent BLE security, 2 of them had a significant vulnerability other than Bluetooth that made them pretty practical. So out of 16 locks, there were really only 2 that came out clean. And this was only a year and a half ago. So even though we've known best practices, they're not necessarily being deployed. So you could ask yourself, well, as long as we're not any worse than mechanical lock, isn't that okay? And mechanical locks, especially in the United States, are pretty easy to break into. You know, here in China, there tends to be multi-point locking. It's also common in Europe. In the US, if you want to break into somebody's home, other than in big urban areas, you're just tearing apart a wooden door with a crowbar, or you're smashing a window next to the front door and just reaching around and unlocking it. So as long as our electronic locks are not any easier to break into than that, aren't we good enough? The issue is, if somebody breaks into a mechanical lock, at least you know it's happened. and they have to physically access your front door, break in. Hopefully you're not home when they do it, but you come home and you know you've got a problem. With an electronic hack, with a connected lock, the danger is an undetected breach. Somebody could break in remotely from the comfort of their own home, and then, at their leisure, potentially repeatedly access your home, and you have no idea you've got a problem. So that's why it's not sufficient for us to just be as good as the mechanical technology we're replacing. We have to be better. And so we have to look at the full stack here and look at security at every part of this. You know, at the device, at the edge, we need enough intelligence in the devices that we can encrypt what's in the firmware. We can encrypt all the communications to the mobile device. We want to do edge processing so that when we do move data to the cloud, it's minimal amounts of data. We're not moving everything for processing to the cloud. That can have a negative implication on convenience. In the US, a fully connected electronic lock typically costs around $250. In China, the appetite is more around $100. To be able to put in the kind of processing power we need to do full encryption at every step of the way, those are hard goals to rectify against each other. Similarly, we need to encrypt every bit of communications. And it's a best practice to have the device always initiate any communications to the cloud. Now, if we literally held to that, that would impact convenience as well. But when the cloud needs to talk to the lock to give it an update, the cloud can say, hey, I need to talk to you, then shut down the communications, have the device wake up, and then open up a channel for the actual communications to happen. And that's a way we prevent spoofing. Our whole infrastructure needs to be secure. And that includes encrypting everything in the cloud, everything in the applications, and maybe even more importantly, make the system resistant to social engineering. I would hate to find out that some engineer who had admin rights to what we've got on the cloud clicked on a link that came into their work email, and they opened us up to a phishing attack that then allowed those credentials to be stolen. So there's lots of vulnerability. It's not just product vulnerability that we have to worry about. And then we talked a little bit yesterday in the panel about firmware updates. And that's a big concern. Having our customers, we don't control them, install the security patches. And then some best practices. I won't go through all of these. I think I'm running a little bit long, but network security. I talked about there's 5 different communication protocols that are employed in the industry. Most of those aren't using IP, so the edge protection isn't as mature, especially on those proprietary protocols. Our IT departments don't have techniques to monitor Zigbee traffic, for example. Authentication. We talked about quantum computing yesterday and how it feels like if that becomes available to the hackers, it's going to put them maybe a little bit ahead in the encryption arms race. So it's important that we find multi-factor authentication techniques. And especially, I think, machine learning and AI to look at behaviors in addition to whether somebody has the expected credentials. Encryption every step of the way, and this one just seems so obvious, especially probably to an audience like this. But you saw examples of companies that are making locks and aren't encrypting passwords on board. So the obvious stuff isn't always getting done. And then some success factors in IoT that aren't necessarily security related, but are things that we need to keep in mind as we connect our devices, especially consumer products. As manufacturers, we need to focus on outcomes rather than technologies. My engineering team, myself, probably many of you in the audience, we get excited about technology. But our customers aren't excited about technology. They're excited about outcomes. They're excited about that scenario at the beginning of having this connected life that provides new levels of convenience for them. when we design our products, we need to focus on those outcomes and not how we're making that happen. Open architectural approaches are important. There's a multitude of proprietary standards, as I showed. That becomes a challenge to truly connecting up devices. I believe open architectures, while you could argue, and I think somebody in one of the industrial IoT presentations talked about how there's this myth that hackers don't understand PLCs and SCADA. First of all, that is a myth. So, people who ascribe to that myth think of, well, in open architecture, more hackers know how to hack those systems, so proprietary systems are safer. And it's just not true, because the advantage on the open architecture side is we have the collective experience of the entire industry working on defenses together. So as a company, we're trying to push not only ourselves, but everybody else, even the ones we compete with, to go to more open standards. Simple use cases enable more complex ones. So I talked about the evolution of electronic locks. Design thinking. Consumers buy, in many cases, on price and design. So, aesthetics are important. IoT customers need end-to-end solutions. They don't want to be their own IT department. And then embedded intelligence. This has some security intelligence, security implications. But intelligence in the devices allow us to do the things like multi-factor authentication, monitoring of behavior, and minimizing the amount of vulnerable data that we have to exchange to the cloud. So, finally we have a choice. We can do things the easy way, or we can do things the hard way. But, the point is, with connected devices, you need to evaluate what vulnerabilities we're exposing by connecting up our customers. What convenience are we giving them? And then find the right level of security. And of course, security should always trump convenience. Be conservative, because our customers have entrusted their lives into our hands in many cases. So thank you, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
好，非常感谢杜毅先生带来的演讲。好，这位先生有问题想要问我们的杜毅先生。来，工作人员把话筒给他。
Thank you. Going back to the Black Hat, did you have them reach out, did the security researchers reach out to your company to disclose the vulnerabilities and give you an opportunity to respond?
In the case of that particular one, I don't know. We actually were one of the lucky ones that weren't exposed as having a vulnerability. However, this year, a PhD researcher in Canada reached out to us and said he had found a pretty sophisticated side channel attack. Probably something that so if there are PhDs out there who are interested in breaking into homes, he found a way. We literally that afternoon had an engineer on a plane to Nova Scotia, sat down and talked with them. And the hacker ethic, he went ahead and presented, but he gave us kudos at the presentation and said, hey, I talked to Schlage, they've already patched it, and they were great to work with. My understanding is that hotel lock hack was presented at Black Hat, and the manufacturer had blown off the security researcher, and he was pretty pissed, and that's why he revealed as much as he did. So, yeah, when the hackers contact you, engage with them.
Right. Thank you. And just to follow that up, do you entertain, are you thinking about entertaining bug bounty or anything for your devices?
We have talked about that, and I would like to put something in place. I think the difficulty, as we've talked about bug bounty, is how do you rate the level of severity so that you're paying for the really good stuff?
Right.
And then make the people who are putting it in feel like there was a fair process to evaluate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
好，那边还有一位先生，来，工作人员把话筒给到。
Yeah, hi Todd, thanks, great presentation. I just wonder, in your view, how do you think that open architecture and interoperability framework should be best driven? Is that by standards bodies, governments, or commercial vendors?
So personally, I think government would be the least attractive of those, because ideally we come up with a global solution. The standards bodies, the issue is you saw 5 connectivity solutions up there, and you're from Dyson, you know, your consumer product as well. They all feel like they're in competition with each other. So I think ideally it's going to be all of us in industry starting to drive you know, that commonality of those open architectures and standards that we all adhere to.
好，我们这位先生还有问题想要提问您。
Good morning. You mentioned in one of your slides that machine-to-machine need a breakthrough. It is a breakthrough in terms of regulation, in terms of security. What type of breakthrough are you referring to?
So I think when I wrote that bullet, it was about a machine-to-machine relationship that develops for the first time. How do 2 machines authenticate each other and know that they're authorized to communicate? And there's been discussion around blockchain, for example, as a way to govern that relationship. You know, for those of you who looked at blockchain, it's hard to envision a battery-powered edge device doing the computations necessary to participate in that. But I've also read there are some techniques being developed where those edge devices can be part of the blockchain, but not have to do all the computation. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. That's kind of what I was thinking, is we need an authentication mechanism where you don't have to have this human intervention.
Thank you.
好，非常感谢朱迪先生的回答。还有在座的还有什么问题想要提问我们的朱迪先生的吗？好，那就让我们再次把掌声送给我们的朱迪先生。Thank you very much. 好，那接下来要有请到的是来自中。